What's up, FlowChat Connector? Sean here, and I'm curious, have you ever learned something or you read something and it was so cool and you're like, oh my God, I have to use this in my business or I have to do this in my life. And then you move on and all of a sudden you forget what it was that you wanted to learn, and then you can't go back and find that. Like, that's really frustrating for me. That used to happen an awful lot until I learned 3 words, and I wanted to share those words with you. So if you're excited, stay tuned. We're going to dive right in. What's up, FlowChat Connector? Sean back at you. In the next few minutes, I'm going to give you 3 words that I'm pretty sure will probably change your life if you're paying attention to them. But I wanted to start quickly by just saying, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this out to somebody that also maybe isn't the best at remembering things. But let's get into it. I think the first thing that we need to talk about is where and how I learned this. So in my experience, one of the things I would do is I read. I love reading. I'm a meta learner, and most people maybe don't like to read as much as I do, but I like looking for things like frameworks, and I'll learn different types of frameworks and things like that. And sometimes when I first started learning this, I would get these frameworks, I'd write them down in my notebook, and then I would be like, oh man, like I still didn't remember it, even though I wrote it down. I'd read it, I'd absorb it, then I'd write it down, then I try to learn it, and that didn't work for me. And it wasn't until I ended up going to this conference with one of my dear friends, Steve Larson. And Steve Larson was talking to me and he said, Sean, do you ever forget things like you? And I was like, yes, I totally do. This is me. Like, how do I fix this? And he says to me, he goes, well, do you want the 3 secret words I use to remember everything I learned? And I was like, well, yeah. And he said, well, it's really interesting because instead of giving you these 3 secret words right up front, which I'm going to give to you here in a second, what he said to me was, let me prove it to you. And so he said, what I want you to do is I'm going to teach you some framework. And the framework was very simple. It's not really important, but the framework was DOSE. It's the 4 chemicals in the brain, how they function and interact. And it's a really cool way to engage with somebody like on social for something. So like the acronym was DOSE, and he was teaching me this framework, DOSE. And he taught it to me, and he's like, okay, you know it now, right? I'm like, well, I think I know it. And he's like, you want to know how you can reinforce that? And I said, how? He's like, go teach it to someone else. And at that moment in my life, I realized, I was like, oh my God, that's it. Like, that is the ultimate secret to how to remember everything. And I was like, whoa, this is crazy. Let me show you what I mean. Very simply, the 3 words: learn for 2. Learn for 2. Can't be more simple than that, right? That's 3 words. In fact, I even made a letter on the end, not even a word. But if you change your patterns when you're learning things to learn for 2 instead of just yourself, you're going to do better. Now, you're probably thinking like, Sean, what in the heck does this mean? Well, it's very simple. There's 2 graphics I want to share. Number 1, we're learning to solve a problem. Now, in the case of my story with Steve, he was teaching me this DOSE formula so that I could activate the brain receptors in a way that would create buyers at the end. And so the formula was simple. It was D stands for dopamine. You got to give them a dopamine hit. That's that quick fix. That's that energy. That's getting a text message. That's receiving a message, instant messenger, right? Then we got to have oxytocin. Oxytocin is the connection part of the brain chemical. Why am I connecting with you? Why did you send me this message? What's cool about it? Why are we the same? Like, I need to connect with you. That's connection. That's what oxytocin is, right? S stands for serotonin. We all know the serotonin blast, right? When we're giving somebody a good hit of good medicine, maybe they just got the, like an attaboy or a copy and awesome or something like that. That's the serotonin. And then, of course, the endorphins is that feel good, that feeling you get after the gym. And when I learned these things, I was like, oh, if I could apply that into my messaging, it would be more effective. And so what I've just done with you is I took the concept that Steve taught me. I learned it for myself. I wrote it in my notebook like I used to do all the time. But then I went one step further and I took the second step and I actually teach someone else the same thing that I just learned. Here's what you will find. Your retention will go up dramatically, like almost to 100%. You will remember it almost always, including the story of where and how you learned it. So if you struggle to tell stories, this is also a really, really powerful move, because when you're like, hey, I got to share this thing with you. This is how you got to hear the story. You start telling a story, you teach somebody something that you learned in that story, just like I did with you today. And next thing you know, you'll never, ever forget that framework. And that was how I was able to go from doing things like reading a ton of books and never remembering anything. And then all of a sudden I would just get so frustrated. I would be like, dang it. It's annoying. And then I had this transformational experience when I met Steve. And at the end of that, I was like, whoa, that's super powerful. So I wanted to share this with you because I think if you are looking to remember and comprehend things a little bit better, this strategy, learning for 2, will truly enhance your life. And with that said, you've just been tuned up. I hope this was a good one for you. Please share this out to someone else. Smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and I can't wait to see you next time.